What Discoveryland is, it's an actual collection of different futures. Different futures that throughout time everyone has dreamed and believed in. So this collection of futures is really what makes it timeless. The entrance to Discoveryland is not a direct pathway from the plaza. It is actually a curved pathway that leads you into a large plaza. The curvature is really meant to create a sense of discovery, to take you away from the rest of the park. And this plaza opens up to a piece that we feel is a real symbol for Discoveryland, and that is the Orbitron. The Orbitron is a ride, is an icon, and it is a piece of art. Its overall look has the look of like a Leonardo da Vinci planetary model, in a sense that it shows how the planets revolve around the sun. It is a piece of technology, but it's a friendly piece of technology. So when people see that, it becomes the signature piece of this kind of technological but fun approach that we have in Discoveryland. The next attraction that we created specifically for Disneyland Paris was the Visionarium Show. We wanted to create not just a movie, but we also wanted to create an attraction. In this particular attraction, we also use it as the summing up point of what all of Discoveryland is all about. It is a time machine journey in which we actually capture Jules Verne. We bring Jules Verne to his future, our present, and we see through his eyes this fabulous world that we live in. Then, there's an extra little trick to it. We take the whole audience into the future, 100 years into the future, and see Paris of the future. The Visionarium Show was actually specifically created for Disneyland Paris, and it has proved to be incredibly successful to the point where now we have it in Tokyo Disneyland, as well as Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom. One of the other main attractions at Discoveryland in Paris has been Videopolis. This is the largest enclosed food facility and entertainment complex, I think, at Disneyland Paris. Our concept here was to create a definite aircraft or airship hangar. This is kind of a Jules Verne style. The serving area is styled as if it was an old ticket counter, and this is where you purchased your ticket to go on these airship adventures. The airship that you see at the entrance was designed from the movie Island at the Top of the World that was produced by the Walt Disney Company. It's a wonderful kind of Jules Vernean kind of airship that was a dream vehicle of that era. The exterior looks like an airship hangar, as I mentioned. It's got flags and banners and all the components which make that up. But on the inside is where all the action is. Not only as a food facility, but primarily as an entertainment complex. They've taken advantage of it tremendously. It is a wonderfully working complex, and it's been satisfying to actually see it work as well as it has. We have two shops in Discoveryland. We have Constellations and we have the Star Trader shop. Constellations is general overall Disney merchandise. And what we wanted to do to make sure it was themed towards Discoveryland was create a wonderful kind of Jules Vernean flying machine, which is in the center of the shop. Star Trader shop focuses a little bit more on the scientific approach. It's right at the exit of Star Tours and of Captain EO. So it has more of the Star Tours merchandise and more kind of the high-tech games and toys and elements that we have put into the park. In Star Tours, this is an example of another vision of the future that we've spoken about. And this is definitely a George Lucas vision of the future, and it's more of a contemporary vision of it. Our Star Tours, we have such confidence in it that, and we knew the popularity would be so enormous that we did build the largest one. I believe that the Star Tours at Disneyland Paris has 6 cabs. At Disneyland in California, they have 4. And at the MGM Studio Tour, they have 5. It happens to be one of my favorite rides. It always pays off. The excitement, the energy level, the storyline, everything works. It's a very contemporary story, and one that I think people can relate to, especially through contemporary film and movies and cinema. Cinemagique for Discoveryland was also a very unique attraction to install in the park for a couple of reasons. One, it's the home of Captain EO. The other element to it is that we built this as a very fine premier theater system. So as the cast members do well know, that we have premiered many Disney films over in Europe right at the Cinemagique. So look for more new exciting things to come to Cinemagique. Autopia goes back to another Walt Disney film about the future. It was a film that was presented on the television show called Magic Highways. And it was a story kind of taking the image, I should say, of the 1930s, 1940s popular science magazine covers that showed vast highways and freeways that would travel across the great United States. And we could travel from New York to Los Angeles nonstop. And this film that Walt had created was a great vision of the future. And so we took some of that styling, which was kind of a 1930s deco style, if you will. And it was reminiscent of that era where, after the 1939 World's Fair in New York, anything was possible. We put along the roadway these wonderful billboards that kind of rekindle that feeling of wonderful cities and mile-high towers, and so it really was reminiscent of that kind of look. Also, as a driving experience, kids always love that kind of ride. You get to drive your own car and drive your father and mother crazy, and so it actually ended up proving to be a wonderful little attraction. In 1955, Walt Disney was running out of attractions for Tomorrowland. He didn't know what to do, and he had all these sets for the Nautilus that he had just completed for the movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So he had all the sets taken to Tomorrowland, and and they created this walkthrough. Actually allowed you to walk through the sets of the Nautilus. So when we decided to create the Nautilus again, which again was a perfect marriage between the Walt Disney Company and the most famous science fiction film of its time was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, as well as the writer Jules Verne. We married those together. The submarine itself, the Nautilus, to me, is still one of the #1 science fiction icons of all time. It's still a very recognizable, very elegantly and beautifully designed piece. So we created a full-size Nautilus submarine, and we had our guests take a walk through the mysteries of the Nautilus, which was taking you through the submarine itself, not just the sets, but a real submarine. So it really puts you into the set, really puts you into the spirit, and really, again, rekindle that vision of a vision of Jules Verne's future.
1, 2, 1, action! Retreating, Captain!
From the very beginning, the plans for Discoveryland incorporated a new version of Space Mountain. This was the ultimate marriage of a story, a vision, and a technology. Space Mountain today represents, I would say, and from a technological point of view, probably the finest technical components that go into a thrill attraction anywhere. In terms of the storyline, we had the wonderful opportunity of using Jules Verne's story, From the Earth to the Moon. And that was a very, very strong and very compelling basis for doing this attraction. In that story, there was a very large cannon that shot this train from the Earth to the Moon. From our point of view here at Imagineering, we've always wanted to create a ride about outer space and create it with a launch that starts with a catapult. If you're going to go to space, we might as well fire you off. So the doability of this was not all that easy. We had to create our own catapult launch. Here at Imagineering, our ride engineers figured out how to do this. This is, in fact, the first incline catapult launch system ever created. So there are basically 4 components of this particular attraction which make it totally unique, aside from the exterior styling, which is consistent with the rest of Discoveryland. The 4 elements happen to be this catapult launch. As I mentioned, it is the first incline catapult launch system ever developed. Secondly, on a thrill ride, we've created the first onboard audio sound system. The interesting thing about this is that we took an audio musical track and put it in synchronization with the ride, not only from the speed and the thrill point of view, but also, almost more importantly, from the emotional point of view. The third element is that we actually take you into the dark, into this outer space environment, and on 3 occasions take you upside down. The fourth element, which truly makes Space Mountain unique, is that for the first time we allow our guests to actually walk through an attraction before they go on the ride. The other side of this walkthrough encompasses a passageway where anyone can actually walk through. So we feel that this, in doing so, that this ride is actually an attraction for everyone. Everyone can participate in it. The rockwork at Discoveryland is very, very unique. We've always known that when we were going to create Space Mountain, that it was going to have a rockwork fascia on it that was meant to look like it was sitting in a volcano. Jules Verne, in many of his stories, created landscapes and adventures that took you to volcanoes. And we created a whole series of these volcano pockets, and we set our attractions into it. The story being that these volcano pockets were actually the energy sources that drove these attractions. The overall palette for using neon in Discoveryland was really meant to give a visual metaphor that is electrically charged. There are sparks of energy that go on throughout this place, and it's those sparks that are represented as a metaphor in terms of ideas and innovation, as well as a kind of a whole different look, marrying a little bit of the new with the old. Well, the whole style of Discoveryland not only goes from the big picture point of view, if you will, all the way down to the smallest details. Everything has to be consistent with the overall theme. It's one of the strengths that we at Disney have over other people. The integrity and the inclusion of all the components of a land are really the pieces that actually make, and sometimes unknown to our guests, but they are the things that make this really a worthwhile Disney experience. And that's one thing that we here at Imagineering pride ourselves in, and we're most encouraged when the parks continue to follow through with all those details. It takes cast members to really believe in what we do here. And actually, my experience going back continuously over there, it's really quite gratifying to see how many of the cast members have now the emotional investment in Discoveryland, I will speak to directly, to actually make sure that they maintain that integrity. And it's very gratifying for those of us who worked on the design.